of today's lecture, as you can see, is the intonation question. We've more or less finished now talking about the form of intonation, what intonation is like in English, in RP English, and how one can analyze it. We're now going to start talking about the function of intonation, what it is used for, and try to answer a possible question: why do we bother with intonation at all? Why don't we just speak on a monotone? It would be a lot easier and we wouldn't have to worry about intonation at all. But it would be very boring too, wouldn't it? And I hope to start showing you that intonation is actually very important, a very important part of the process of communicating what you mean in English and in any other language. So the intonation of questions. And I'm going to start off by asking some questions about the intonation of questions, if I can find them. The first question is this: is there a special question intonation in English? Is there a special intonation which, if you use it, everybody will know that you are asking a question? Is there do questions have special intonation? And the answer is no. Very important to realize this. Questions do not have intonation which are different from other sorts of utterances. They are not special really in terms of their intonation in English. They are in some other languages, but not in English. So the answer to that question is definitely no. The second question that I'm going to ask and answer for you is: are there any intonation patterns which cannot be used with questions? And the answer to that question is that. What? It says very few, but the printer didn't like it. Very few indeed. All sorts of intonation patterns can be used with questions. And the last question I'm going to ask and answer for you is this: does it matter what intonation you use when you ask a question? And the answer is yes. Sort of. The answer is certainly yes. If you ask a question with one intonation, the meaning of the question may be different from if you ask it with another intonation. But when I say meaning, I also include things like the sort of attitude you convey to your hearer, whether you sound friendly or not. If you ask it with the wrong intonation, you might get a black eye. So be careful. Okay, you've got a sort of taxonomy of questions on your handout, and we'll have a look at that. It depends what sort of question you are using, and there are various sorts of questions I shall go through, and what sort of intonation you're using with that particular sort of question. That combination will produce different sorts of meaning. So what sorts of questions are there? Well, I'll put the lights on full so that everybody can see what we're doing here. Turn that off. The first one that I've listed on your handout at point 1 there are WH questions. Now, WH questions begin with a WH word, a word like what, who, why, when, how, which, etc. Now, in English, and in lots of other languages too, WH questions are often said with a falling nuclear tone. So I've given you some examples of that at A, B, and C. The falling nuclear tone could be a high fall, as in A. Where are you going for your holiday? Or a low fall, as in B, why are you still here? Or even arise for, as in C, what did you think I was going to say? Now the differences between those different tones within that group, falling tones, that a high fall simply sounds polite and interested. Where are you going on your holiday? I sound as though I want to know the answer. Yeah? And that I may well be interested in the answer. In B, why are you still here? That's rather cool, reserved. It doesn't sound particularly friendly. There is an implication you should not still be here. Okay? Why are you still here? If I were just interested in the answer, I would use a high fall. Why are you still here? C, with a rise fall, could be challenging. What did you think I was going to say? I said that, and I thought that was fairly obvious. What did you think I was going to say? You might imagine somebody sort of rolling up their sleeves while they're saying that, if they have any sleeves. Okay. However, WH questions, these words which begin with what, who, one, begin these words what, who, why, which, when, etc., can be produced with a rising tone. Now it depends where the rising tone is, where the nucleus is, as to exactly what the implication of the intonation is. If the rising tone occurs on the WH word itself, on the what or the who or the why, then that will have a different implication from if it occurs somewhere else. So let's have a look first at those WH questions which have rising tones, and the nucleus is the WH word, as in the examples on your handout D, E, F, and G. So D is with a high rise. When do you want to meet her? E, who gave the lecture on intonation? F, why did they say they were going on Sunday? G, she said she's going to marry who? You notice that the WH word can be at the end as well as at the beginning, but if we put the rising tone there on that WH word, really what a speaker is doing is asking for the repetition of some information, because maybe the speaker didn't hear it first time round, or the speaker didn't believe it the first time round. So if I say, I want to meet her, when do you want to meet her? I didn't hear, sorry. And then G, she said she's going to marry Michael Jackson. She's going to marry who? Okay. Now, if we put the, so that's, if the rising tone is on the WH word, repetition, that's what you're asking for, because of mishearing, disbelief, or you've forgotten the answer or something. You can put it on some other item, as I said, as in H and I. This is very often used when you meet somebody, sort of trying to encourage them to give you information, to get them talking to you. So you might say something like, oh, hello, do you come here often? What's your name? What do you do for a living? Where do you live? Etc. Okay, so it's a sort of encouraging information. But you can see that even though it is a WH question, you can produce it with a rising tone. Now, this next bit of information, I don't know whether you've been told this already in your lecture on that you had on the nucleus. It's not on your handout. WH words like which and what and whose tend to have a rather special place for the nucleus. there is usually a noun somewhere in the sentence following this, not always for what, but for which and whose, and that is the place where the nucleus usually falls in a WH type question for those. So, for example, if we have a sentence like this, the nucleus is really going to fall there, and you would probably say, which tie did you buy? Whose car is that? What books do you want to take with you? Now, that's actually quite a strange place to put the nucleus, because the verb at the end here is also a content word, and you would expect the nucleus to fall there. But in these sorts of questions, these are an exception, a sort of accentual exception in English. There are a few others as well. If you have which, what, whose questions, it tends to fall on the noun to the which, the what, or the whose refers, rather than the verb at the end. It does, that's got nothing to do with what sort of nuclear tone you use, but where the nucleus is. Okay, so that's the simple story for WH questions, and you can see that you can use a high fall, a low fall, you can use a high rise, a low rise, you can use almost any nuclear tone in a WH question. We now go on to another sort of question. I've put two on your handout. I've called them interrogative questions. They're sometimes called yes-no questions. Those are the sorts of questions to which you can answer with the words yes or no. Now, rising tones are certainly common in yes-no questions in English, as you can see at examples J and K. So, are you enjoying your new job? Is he really going to divorce her? I'm talking about Michael Jackson again. No. So, in the low-rise one, are you enjoying your new job? That's a fairly neutral way of asking a yes-no question. It doesn't have really very many implications. It's fairly friendly, it's fairly interested, you do want to know the answer, sure. But K, where I've used a high rise on really, is he really going to divorce her? I'm astounded if the answer is yes. I'm going to be very surprised if the answer is yes. So, very curious, or with the implication that if a particular answer is given, the answer yes, then you're going to be surprised. Interrogative questions, yes-no questions, can certainly be produced with a fall-rise nuclear tone, as in L and M. When you do that, what you are really doing is not asking a question at all very often, but giving a request for something to happen. So, L, can you pass me the salt? And M, could you help me to move this bookcase? I think most people asking those questions like that will be very annoyed if somebody said yes and did nothing at all. Can you pass me the salt? Yes. No, it's a request for somebody to do something rather than a real question for information. Now, it's usually said, quite often said, that yes-no questions in English must have a rising tone, or nearly always have a rising tone. But if you look at the example, little dialogue in example N, where we've got this sort of thing going on. Are you coming on Wednesday? I'm afraid I'm busy tomorrow. Yes, but are you coming on Wednesday? Where the yes-no question, the second time it is asked, has a falling tone. And that is a demand for information, demand for the correct information. So when I say, are you coming on Wednesday? What I am saying is, to please answer the question I asked and not some other question? So you can find falling tones on yes-no questions in English, or interrogative questions in English. The next sort of question that you can see at 3 is the examples O and P, and Q and R. We'll look at those in a moment, O and P, where the speaker chooses to use the syntax, which use a syntactic pattern which doesn't look like a question at all, it looks like a statement. But you can use intonation to turn that statement type syntax into a question. And we very often do this with a high-rise nuclear tone, as in O or P. So O says, you're leaving. You could say, of course, are you leaving? But you can choose to not do the inversion and say, you're leaving. And P, she wants all of them, instead of does she want all of them. Now, in many languages, for example, Italian, Spanish, lots of other languages, this is the usual way of asking a yes-no question. In English, it's actually quite unusual, I think, to do it this way. And there are other languages, as I said, like Spanish, where that is the usual way. In fact, that is very often the only way of asking a yes-no question, to produce a rising tone rather than a falling tone. But you can see in English that that is not true, and these declarative questions are actually reasonably rare. You could use a fall-rise on a declarative question as well, as in example Q. They'll all be there. That is a question, or it could be interpreted as a question, but it's a very doubtful question. They'll all be there. If the answer is yes, I'm not sure that you're right. If you're going to say yes, I'm not sure that you're going to be right. Are you absolutely sure? Now, when you start looking at intonation in English and lots of languages, you start realizing that it is very difficult to find intonational impossibilities. You say, take this sentence. Can you use this intonation? Yes. Can you use it? Yes. Are there any intonations you can't use? Well, I don't know. But I found one for you. Here's one that you can't use. You can't use on a statement type, on a sentence with a statement type syntax, a rising head and a high fall, and expect it to be understood as a question. You can't make questions with a rising head and a high fall. Be careful. You can find questions like WH questions or real questions which are questions without the intonation. You can find questions with a rising head and a high fall. For example, when is he going to come? Or do you speak French? Okay. But you can't turn a statement into a question with this intonation. So R at the bottom, sorry, the tone marks are missing on R at the bottom. It should have a little arrow before don't, a rising arrow before don't, and a high fall nuclear tone before go, like that. It would sound like this: I don't want to go. What I am saying is that that would never be interpreted as a question. So that tune, rising head and a high fall, is impossible on declarative words, not on other sorts of questions. Now if we turn over the page, we come to these horrible things, tag questions. If you want to leave now, please do. Tag questions are nasty. Now, English really is the only language that I know of where tag questions are so complicated. I mean, most languages simply have a little tag that you stick on the end of the sentence, like n'est-ce pas, or nevero, or d'ailleurs, something, in various languages. English now, we have to be very complicated. We have to start taking the verb, switching it round, making it negative, making it positive, changing the intonation. I don't know why. There are basically three syntactic patterns, three main syntactic patterns for take questions, which I've given you at 4, 1, 2, and 3. The main verb positive, you speak French. The tag negative, don't you? The main verb negative, the tag positive. You don't speak French, do you? And the main verb positive and the tag positive. You speak French, do you? Okay. Now, 1 and 2 we can call reverse polarity tags. We have plus, minus, or minus, plus. The 3, we have constant polarity. We have plus, plus. Minus, minus is not possible. If anybody can tell me why, I will be very happy. You don't speak French, don't you? Is not possible. Okay. Constant polarity tags are quite simple, really. That's number 3. As we can see in examples S and T. The tag question really must be rising. The tag bit must be rising, as in S. He did he? It is impossible to have a constant polarity tag with a forming question. Impossible is a very dangerous word, but I'm going to use it. He did he, is not possible. What is possible is that you can produce a constant polarity tag with a single word group without splitting the tag off into its own word group, and I'm afraid the nuclear tone mark went missing in T. There should be a rise before go. It should look something like that. So it would sound like this. You're going, are you? The S1, constant polarity tag with a fall plus a rise. He did he? Very often sounds suspicious, or maybe even threatening. Oh, he did he? I'll see to that. And T is, you're going, are you? It sounds very casual. I don't really care about the answer. Now, reverse polarity tags are much more complicated, and it really depends on whether the speaker is asking a real question, is wanting some information, or whether the speaker already has an expectation of what the answer is going to be and actually demands, or more or less, demands agreement with that expectation. So if we have the first situation where we have a real question, the speaker wants some information. The speaker may already suspect what the answer is, but that's why the speaker is using a tag question rather than some other sort of question, but would not be too surprised if that expectation were wrong. And so you get the pattern of a fall or a rise, or a fall rise, or a rise fall in the first part, and then some sort of rising tone in the second part. It might be just a rise, or it might be a fall rise. So, for example, you speak French, do you? Or you don't speak French, do you? Sorry, I'll get it right in a minute. You speak French, don't you? And you speak, or you don't speak French, do you? If I ask that question, you don't speak French, do you? Well, I'm thinking that you don't. Yeah? I'm thinking it. But if you say, yes, I speak perfect French, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Okay? I'd accept that. And similarly, if I say, you don't speak French, do you? Or you speak French, don't you? I'm thinking that you do. Yeah, I think I've heard you speak French some time ago, but you say, no, I can't speak a word of French. then I wouldn't be terribly surprised. So the rising tone at the end really makes it into a real question of some sort. Now, in the other case, where we have a fall on the on the tag itself, I really am thinking that I am right, and if you tell me that I'm wrong, I'm going to be a bit surprised. So, you speak French, don't you? No, I don't. What? I'm sure you spoke French. Or, you don't speak French, do you? Yes, I do. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, it's a real surprise if your expectation is contradicted. So, this difference between a rise on the tag and a fall on the tag carries that sort of difference of meaning. There are a couple of other sorts of questions that I've listed on your handout, but 5 and 6. 5 I've called echo questions, where you are asked a question and you echo it back to the speaker in order to make sure that you're going to answer the right question. So, for example, somebody comes up to you in Gower Street and says, "Where's University College, please?" And you say, "Where's University College? Is that what you're asking me?" And so you're echoing back what happens. And that's usually produced with a high rise, as I've shown you in U and V. So, where's University College? Is that what you're asking me? Was it an interesting lecture? Is that what you're asking me? Fall rise can be used on echo questions too, as in examples W and X. For example, in W, somebody says, "Is Fred a rich man?" And you say, "Is he rich? Is that really what you're asking me?" I thought everybody knew that he has millions and millions and millions of pounds. Okay? I thought everybody knew that. And X, for example, "Is English intonation easy? Is that what you're asking me? You must be joking." So you're checking on the fact that you are answering the right question, but when you use a full rise, you're actually very surprised at that question. And the last sort of question that I've got on here is at 6, what I've called fill in the blank question. You can use a sentence and leave a blank for the person to put their answer in, as in why. And your name is? And the course you did was, etc. You can do that with either a mid-level nuclear tone or with a low-rise nuclear tone. So, and your name is, or, and your name is, and the course you did was, or, the course you did was, fill in the blanks. So in Y and Z. Good. Now that's the story of the intonation of questions in English. Are there any questions about that? Use the right intonation.
How about short questions?
Sorry?
How about short questions?
Give me an example of what you mean by a short question.
I like Michael Jackson, do you?
Do you? Very similar to tag questions, I think. But actually, when you think about it, I like Michael Jackson. Do you? When you use it as a fall, it's not really a question anymore. When you're using it as a rise, do you? It is a question. You want confirmation of what the speaker just said, and perhaps you are a little surprised at that information. So I like Michael Jackson. Do you? Are you sure? But I like Michael Jackson. Do you? How interesting. Don't really need an answer. It looks like a question, but it isn't really. I mean, you could have a conversation like this. I like Michael Jackson. Do you? And then 3 hours silence. And that wouldn't be strange. Well, it might be a little strange, but not entirely. A falling on a short question, a falling tone on a short question like that really often does not require an answer. It says, "Okay, I've got the information, I've heard it, end of story." Any other questions about questions? Yes?
short questions at the beginning of the lecture.
Yes.
Where you said questions don't really have pattern. Fixed attention,
Yes.
and this is not what we have been used to.
No, which is why I said it. Because if you read textbooks, especially textbooks written a long time ago, you will get the impression that a question must have a rising intonation, or a WH question, yes/no question must have a rising intonation, or a WH question must have a falling intonation, and it is simply not true. I'm afraid. I'm sorry, but that's the case.
But my work, if I conclude that when we are really asking a question, when we don't know the answer, it is a rising pattern. And when we say going down, it means that we should assume that we already know the answer or no.
You're talking about yes/no questions, are you? Or
Yes.
no, I don't think that's true. The insistence type question, I insist that you answer, will have a falling tone. Now, do you speak French? Oh, isn't it a nice day? Do you speak French? I don't know the answer when I use the falling tone. But I am insisting that you give me the information I want. Yeah. Any other questions?
So in any case, the level term cannot be used for questions.
It can in, the level tone can be used in fill in the blank questions, that's about all. Oh, it can be used in very, very bored yes/no questions. Well, do you speak French? When I'm really bored and I'm not really very interested in the answer, I can use, if I've asked the same question to 200 people, one after the other, by the time I get to 100, I might start using a level tone rather than a rising tone. Any other questions? Yes, sorry.
I was told that it was impossible to make a statement into a question because it's a new trend to ask.
Oh no, it's been around for a very long time. Yes. Yes. Sorry? Oh, in spoken English, yes. Yes. Sure. Oh, yeah. No, there's nothing peculiar about it. It's not appeared in the past 2 years or something. It's been around as long as I have, anyway. Any other questions? Now you've got another sheet of paper which has got dialogue on it, which has got lots of questions in it. I'll put it up on the OHP to make the lights down a little. Right, there are lots and lots and lots of questions with it. You now have 3 minutes to decide for yourselves what intonation you're going to use on at least some of those questions. And then we'll have a look at some of the answers. So talk to your neighbour about it for a couple of minutes. See what you can make of it. Think about, for the tag questions, for example, think whether they are really wanting some information or whether they are demanding agreement. Go through the rest of it with you if I don't find time. The first question here, WH question. What do you reckon to that, people? Falling where? Where's the nucleus going to be? Neuse, yes. High fall, probably. So we might have a high head starting on what and a high fall on neuse. So it would sound like this. What did you do with the newspaper? What did you do with the newspaper? Then we've got a tag question, so we'll probably divide it there into 2 word groups. Is this a request for information? Do I know the answer? Do I expect a particular answer? It could be. Let's do it as though we really don't know. So, where are we going to put the nucleus in the first word group? Way, probably. Let's have a fall rise, why not? You haven't thrown it away, say falling head on have. You haven't thrown it away. Sorry? Why don't I have it on throw? You haven't thrown it away because away is the last informative bit, really. Anyway, you could think of throw away as being a compound verb, and compound verbs usually have their nucleus, if they have a nucleus, on the second part, not the first part. If I really don't know the answer, it is a real question, what am I going to do? Rise, yeah? You haven't thrown it away, have you? Here, what's this? We don't know whether that is a statement or a question, except for the fact that there's a question mark at the end. So what sort of intonation are we going to use there? Rise, yeah? Newspaper? Newspaper? Maybe a high rise. And in the second part, where are we going to put the nucleus? What? What sort of nuclear tone? High fall, probably. Newspaper? What newspaper? The newspaper I was reading, that's not a question. Let's have a look at this. Where are we going to put the nucleus? Why? Think is new information, really, isn't it? So we'll put it there, probably with a fall. High head, high fall. Which do you think? Oh, it's on the kitchen table. Divide it there. Sorry, it's on the table in the kitchen. Where are we going to put the nucleus in the first word group? Kitch, probably, here. Let's have a high fall, say. High head starting on tave. What about the tag? Where's that going to go? What sort of tag are we going to have here? You want to fall, okay? All right. That means I saw it there. I'm pretty sure it's there. You should know it's there. So it's on the table in the kitchen, isn't it? Etc. I think we'll have to stop there. If we have time, maybe we'll do a little bit more of this in Monday's lecture.